Good afternoon, everyone. Welcome to the Housing Action Package 2.0 workshop. We're going to get started in just a minute. Okay, good afternoon and welcome to the Housing Action Package 2.0 workshop number 2. My name is Seth Lichney. I am Program Manager for the City Planning Department for Housing Policy. I'm joined today from the Planning Department by Sean McGee, Melissa Garcia, and Corey Funk. They're all senior planners. And I'm also joined by Associate Planner Victoria Ortiz. I'm also joined by Irlanda Fernandez, who will be providing Spanish language translation. And Irlanda, if you could let folks know to raise their hand if they need Spanish translation, we can give it a few minutes and make sure everyone is able to access that service if needed. We'll give one more minute for folks to raise their hands if they need Spanish translation, and then we'll move into the presentation. Okay, we'll move on to the next slide. The purpose of today's workshop is to introduce several of the proposed initiatives being brought forward as part of Housing Action Package 2.0. We would like to receive feedback, comments, and suggestions on the items that are being discussed today. We also have a Housing Action 2.0 website with additional information about each of the items. And also we are posting videos of these workshops on that website. So we've got the Housing Action Package 2.0 proposals divided into 4 categories. On Tuesday, we talked about the proposals for encouraging more homes. Today, we will be talking about the Fair Housing for All initiatives shown in the box on the right. We also have 2 future workshops coming up related to discontinuing harmful uses and anti-displacement and missing middle housing. The next 2 workshops will be held in person. The Missing Middle Housing SP10 workshop will be on March 2nd at the Mission Valley Library, and the Discontinued Harmful Uses and Anti-Displacement Measures workshop will be at the Malcolm X Library on March 13th. There's more information about these in-person meetings on our website. I'll now turn it over to Sean McGee to talk about the Zoom Q&A guidance and how we will be answering questions and taking comments today.
Great, thanks, Seth. So we want to ensure that everyone has an opportunity to ask questions at the end of the presentation, and there's going to be 2 primary means to do so. So the first is going to be verbally, and if you'd like to ask a question verbally at the end of the presentation, please utilize the raise hand icon in your webinar controls at the bottom of your Zoom window. And then also, if you have a question that comes up during the presentation and you want to ensure that it gets answered, please use the Q&A icon in your webinar controls. You may receive a response either verbally or via text. And we'll try to get to all of those. We also kindly request that you limit your questions to the topics that are being addressed by the presentation. Thank you.
Thank you, Sean. The first item we'll be discussing today is off-site unit allowances. The city currently has 2 programs, the Density Bonus Program and its Inclusionary Housing Program, that allow for the development of off-site affordable units. Currently, the municipal code allows for those off-site affordable units to be constructed in specific geographic areas. First, the off-site units may be built within the same community planning area as the market rate project. It can be within 1 mile of the project. And it also could be built in an area that meets certain requirements. And those requirements are within a sustainable development area, in a high or highest resource community, and a community planning area with less than 5% deed restricted affordable housing. In order to further fair housing and ensure that affordable units are constructed in areas where they currently don't exist, the proposal in Housing Action 2.0, and Victoria, you can click the slide here, would remove the ability of offsite units to be built within the same community planning area. This means that the projects would need to be within 1 mile of the market rate project, or be in the areas that are in the bullets that are listed here. The next incentive is a single room occupancy incentive. Single room occupancies are housing developments that provide a single room, usually with shared facilities. They are a low-cost option for residents who need a low-cost option for housing. The city currently has an Affordable Housing in All Communities program that was adopted as part of Housing Action Package 1.0. This allows for 100% affordable home developments in areas that are highest and high resource communities and are also located near transit. The types of homes that are allowed under this program include 100% affordable deed restricted homes, permanent supportive housing, transitional housing, and emergency shelters. In order to encourage the development, incentivize the development of more single room occupancy homes would be added to the list of the types of homes that would be allowed under the Affordable Housing in All Communities incentive program. Next, we have homes on underutilized commercial sites. Existing commercial zones in the city of San Diego may already allow for residential development. As we see changing commercial needs over the next decades, we want to make sure that we have incentives for those properties that are no longer viable as commercial sites to have the ability to develop residential units that are already allowed on their current zone. This program, the Housing Action Package program, would provide an incentive for the development of housing or mixed use development on sites with current commercial uses. The next program is the Complete Communities Housing Solutions Amendments. Complete Communities Housing Solutions is an existing program that the City of San Diego operates. It is intended to allow for the development of more homes near transit. Complete Communities applies to areas that have existing multifamily zones zoned at 20 dwelling units per acre or more. They must be located in a sustainable development area, and they must provide homes that are affordable at very low, and middle incomes. Additionally, Complete Communities Housing Solutions requires neighborhood amenities to be built as part of the development. These neighborhood amenities can include things like pocket parks, plazas, promenades, and cultural amenities. The Complete Communities amendments being brought forward as part of Housing Action Package 2.0 include an incentive for 3-bedroom units for calculating the minimum density. What we've seen is that Complete Communities Complete Communities projects that have been constructed are usually smaller units, and we want to make sure that family homes are something that are encouraged through the Complete Communities program. Additionally, we'll be proposing an incentive for moderate income homes. That would mean that additional deed restricted homes over the existing requirements for moderate income residents would be allowed under the Complete Communities program. We're also proposing some regulation amendments, including the removal of the development impact fee waiver for units that are under 500 square feet. We're also we'll also be allowing for fencing to be on site in Complete Communities projects. Additionally, we'll be looking at ways that we can allow for off-site affordable housing development through Complete Communities. As I mentioned previously, the city has existing programs, including the Inclusionary Housing Program and the Density Bonus Program that allow for off-site affordable housing developments. One of the priorities for those types of off-site affordable housing developments is that they need to further fair housing. And so we will ensure that a proposal for off-site affordable housing for Complete Communities also furthers fair housing by including geographic requirements on where the affordable housing can be built. Additionally, we want to make sure that the neighborhood amenities are also made available for off-site affordable housing development. That concludes the presentation on the items for workshop number 2. This slide shows the next steps, which includes additional public engagement this year, the adoption of draft regulations this spring before we start the hearing process with the Planning Commission, City Council Committee, and Council adoption in the spring and summer of 2023. I'll hand it back to Sean to remind us of how we can participate and provide public comment.
Okay, so I see that we already have a few hands raised, but I'm gonna actually lower all of these hands. So please give me a moment before raising your hands to ask questions, because I just wanna make sure and remind everybody that translation services are available. So if you're in need of translation services, please use the raised hand icon and we'll get that sorted. And I just want to allow for a minute. Okay, I'm not seeing any raised hands. So with that, I'm just going to let everyone know that the translators will plan to leave within the next 5 minutes. Okay, so if people have questions and they would like to ask them, now is the time, and please use the raise hand icon. Okay. So Sally, you're up first. I'm going to allow you to speak and ask to unmute.
Thank you. Sorry about that. Um, the new sustainable development areas now are the 1 mile walk to the nearest transit. Has the change been made regarding current transit stops, or for the next 25 years for major transit stops included there?
So the definition of the SDA will use the major transit stops identified in Sandag's Regional Transportation Plan for 2035.
Okay, so still 12 years away, anywho. So for all the people that would be the low income or the very low income would still have to walk the distance to the transit, whether it's 1 mile now or 12 years from now. So it's not helping the cap very much. As for the middle income, moderate income housing, that's fine. I don't think anybody knows what that means. I appreciate that Corey put in the they're between the 80% and 120% of median income, but we don't know what median income is this year. So if you can put that in the spot. The other one, is it possible to go back on the slides?
Sure. What did you have a question about?
Looking at keep going, pocket parks, etc.
Mhm.
It's nice that they'll have the neighborhood amenities, but nothing is mentioned regarding infrastructure when all of these housing units are being built, where a lot of them they might be near transit or near future transit, but it doesn't mean that the roads are okay or sidewalks are okay or even existing. And there's nothing mentioned in here. How will that be handled?
If we can go to the next slide, we are actually the next slide after that. Sorry, we are proposing for removing a development impact fee waiver that exists under the current program for units that are under 500 square feet. So we do plan on ensuring that we have the development impact fee calculated for these types of units, and they're currently waived under the existing program.
Yeah, I know. And there's also, it allows for fencing, but doesn't say anything about requiring any trees, which if we're going back to the cap, we need. And I know that a lot of the current ones that seem to be coming in have no storage for the properties and not necessarily having parking because they don't require it anymore. So I'm concerned about that as well.
I believe there is a requirement for street trees in complete communities.
Okay, but not for ADUs. And what was the other one that doesn't have them?
The items today are not about the ADU programs, but we do have requirements for ADU development as well for trees.
Okay. Now I got to go back and look at the details. All righty, thank you.
Thank you.
Okay, Jason, you're up.
Hi, thanks. Can you hear me okay? Just wanted to make sure my microphone's working.
Yes.
Okay, perfect. Kind of a two-part question on the complete communities from the proposing the allowance of offsite affordable. The first part is is there going to be any guidance as to whether you'd be subject to what, let's say you're moving that offsite affordable from, for instance, an RM25 zone into a CC39 zone. Is there any exploration, or would we be subject to where we're moving that from to the new zoning requirements in terms of the base zoning, since that's how we calculate that 40% on affordable right now under complete communities?
I think it's something that we could consider as it relates to offsite affordable housing for complete communities. This was something that was brought up during the land development code update that was just adopted last week. So we have some ideas for what we want to address with that, but all of the details still need to be ironed out.
Okay, and then that was like my follow-up question: is there going to be further details released at a date coming up that we could think with, that'll kind of give us time to digest that and then allow for further public comment?
Absolutely. For all of these items, we plan on developing code language and releasing it. I think ideally we would have it by the end of March.
Okay, excellent. Thank you so much.
You're welcome.
Okay, Jessa, you're up.
Hi. My name's Jessa. I am a member of the Business for Good Housing and Homelessness Committee. And I have a few different questions. Sorry, so does my dog apparently, but a few different questions. And I wasn't sure if I should just ask them one at a time and get back in the queue or ask them all at once. What's the best way to do that?
We'd like to make sure that everybody has an opportunity to speak. So maybe ask a couple, and if you need to jump back in the queue, you can do that.
Okay, great. Just cut me off if needed. Thanks. So my first question is, if the planning department, if you guys are all familiar with the UCSD, their data hub with homelessness, it's a homelessness hub data repository.
I've heard about it, yes.
Okay, great. And then I don't know if this is a form for this question, but I was wondering what the status is of the tenant protection ordinance.
Yeah, we're not addressing that as part of Housing Action Package 2.0.
Okay,
but if you'd like to shoot me an email, we can look into what the
okay, great.
Get you some information on the status.
Thank you. I appreciate that. I'll do that. And then my last question is, I'm actually working with a startup that is developing emergency shelters. They can be deployed same day for 1,000 square feet. And I'm wondering what the procurement process is, because I saw emergency shelters was listed as a priority on the first or one of the first slides.
We'll have to get you in touch with the Development Services Department and they can get you information on the process for getting those done. You can include that in the email that you send to me, and we'll get you the information.
Okay, great. Thank you. That's all my questions. I appreciate it.
Thanks.
Okay, Mary, I'm going to ask you to unmute.
Can you hear me?
Yes.
Hi, I'm Mary Young. I live in the 4th District. I just have a couple of questions. I was wondering, we know that, the 4th District is only like 15 minutes away from one of the largest military commands in the world. And so I was wondering, through this initiative, are we looking at private public partnerships to increase housing for military families? We know there's a shortage, and we know that a lot of them would fall within the affordable arenas.
There's not anything that's included in this package, but certainly it's something we could consider in future housing action packages.
When you say future, because how far in the future are we talking before this could be looked at?
I guess there could be a couple of options. I don't have a timeline for another housing action package, but we also do land development code updates, and maybe there's an opportunity for looking at a way to encourage those type of partnerships through that process. I think, Melissa, if you could add the website for our 2023 LDC update in the chat, that's one way that you could provide some information for something that you'd like to see.
Okay. And then my second question is, now, when I used to call and try to find out where affordable housing and what type of affordable housing were being built, it became really difficult. There were agencies that would say, we know it's affordable, but we don't know if it's for seniors or, it's for families or anything like that. And so I'm just wanting to ensure that when you say that housing for all, that we're looking at building, large structures of affordable housing, maybe, more than 100 units for low or medium low folks in areas where they work and can thrive, and there's a lot of resources.
Yeah, absolutely. I think as it relates to providing different types of housing, that's part of the reason why we want to have an incentive for single room occupancy, why we want to have an incentive for family units for 3 bedrooms or more. It's why we want to encourage ADA accessible units. We want to make sure that there is a variety of housing products that are available for all San Diego residents. I would say allowing for housing in places that are close to work. Over the past few years, another program that the planning department operates is updating our community plans. We have recently adopted community plans in places like Kearney Mesa, Mission Valley, Barrio Logan, and we're working on community plan updates. And we actually just adopted one in Mira Mesa as well. We're working on updates in University City in the college area and Hillcrest. So we're really trying to look for opportunities for more housing in places that have access to jobs.
Okay, because housing is important, but we also know that for people to thrive and become successful, that they need resources. And so we want to ensure that there isn't like a concentration of poverty in certain areas that don't have resources or maybe not have the strongest schools. And we just want to make sure it's a fair playing field, and that we see all types of housing for all types of folks in all areas and not just certain areas.
Certainly. Appreciate your comment. Thank you.
Thank you.
Okay, Ashley, I'm gonna ask you to unmute.
Hey there, can you hear me?
Yes.
All right. Yeah, I put this in the chat too, if you guys could disregard it. I was just curious when it comes to the language that you were considering when it to promote more residential and currently zoned commercial, what that might look like. I know we're still waiting on the code language, but what would be the implication though if a existing parcel has a community plan that does not allow residential currently, for example, has a housing cap? Is that something that you all would be looking at in terms of potentially still considering residential in those areas, despite if a community or not?
Yeah, I think for the purposes of HAP 2.0, what we would be implementing would be incentives for commercial zones that already allow housing. And I did see in the comment, there was a mention of Senate Bill 6 and AB 2011, and those were 2 bills that were approved last year by the state of California that allow for residential development on areas that have commercial zones that do not currently allow residential. So there is another avenue for developing housing on those sites that the state of California has created. We want to provide an incentive for places where the life of the commercial area is maybe getting close to its end, and it could be ripe for redevelopment into housing.
Okay, Madison, gonna ask you to unmute.
Hello, Madison Coleman with Climate Action Campaign. I have 2 questions. One, I think is similar to Ashley's, but when you say incentives on homes on underutilized commercial sites, and maybe this is something that will be more specifically mentioned in more depth language, but what types of incentives are you referring to? So that's my first question. And then my second question is just clarification on the complete communities offsite unit option. So will each action or will the housing action package as a whole be required to go to have a coupled EIR with it? Just because we are extremely supportive of housing being in high resource areas, but we want to ensure that this also doesn't give way to having offsite units in high fire area zones and areas that don't have a lot of transportation infrastructure, and that will increase VMT. So I just want to make sure that this all will be going through some type of EIR. Thank you.
So related to the EIR, we will look as we develop our language, we look at the potential environmental impacts. We do have an environmental division in our department who makes a determination on whether or not an environmental impact report is needed. Regarding the offsite affordable housing for complete communities, similar to what we've seen with what we included for the inclusionary housing program and the density bonus program, was a requirement that those offsite affordable houses be in a sustainable development area, meaning that it would be within either 1 mile or 3/4 of a mile of a major transit stop. So while I don't have the detail of exactly what that geographic area is going to look like, that idea of having fair housing would include ensuring that there's access to transit as well. And I may have missed the first part of your question, Madison. Do you mind repeating it again if I didn't answer it?
Yeah, just what types of incentives are you all thinking about when you refer to incentives for developers on for homes on underutilized commercial sites?
So the incentives would either be a waiver of a zoning requirement or possibly a density bonus requirement, or maybe even a combination of both.
Okay, thank you.
You're welcome.
Okay, so Rebecca, I'm going to ask you to unmute.
Okay, yes, thank you. My question involves the offsite affordable units, and it's kind of a multi-part question. The first part of it is, what city department will be determining what constitutes an equivalent unit? What kind of criteria will you have in place to ensure that it's equivalent? That's the first part of the question. The second part is, I'm wondering what kind of oversight or monitoring or enforcement will be in place to ensure that these units that are being offered to low-income residents are truly separate but equal. So that's it.
Sure. I think as that certainly can be a consideration that we would include. I think the idea of having some similar amenities on site for the offsite affordable units would be a major consideration. The enforcement would be of how the units get built would be through the Development Services Department and their building inspections. And as far as ensuring that the housing units are affordable, they would need to be deed restricted. So there would be a covenant signed between the developer and the San Diego Housing Commission stating that they would be available to the residents of a certain income.
Okay, so but what kind, so you don't have any criteria that you've even considered for guidelines to how to ensure that things would be equivalent? My concern here is that these folks, simply because they are low income, they're an entire class of people, they will be segregated away from others simply because they're poor. And I'm having a hard time understanding how that both constitutes a complete community if you place an entire class of people in a different place, and how it affirmatively furthers fair housing if you are allowed to create a separate but equal situation for one class of people. I'm having a hard time understanding this, and I don't understand how it conforms with the HUD guidelines. So if you could help me out here, I'd really appreciate it.
Sure. I think part of what we would look to do and the way that fair housing would be addressed would be through geographic requirements of where these housing units that are built off-site could be constructed. And I just point to it as an example. I'm not sure if this is the route that we would take, but we have the geographic requirements for off-site units for inclusionary housing and for density bonus that says that they need to be in a high resource community as defined by the state of California. So those are places with access to jobs, good schools, fewer environmental impacts, and in sustainable development areas, meaning they have access to transit. We also require that they would be in a community with less than 5% of its housing stock as deed restricted. So we could put something in place like that that says if these units were going to be built off-site, they would need to be built in places where we currently do not have, that are determined to be high resources and currently do not have affordable housing available at that income level. So there's a number of ways that we can do it, and it'll certainly be a priority. And obviously by state law, we're required to make sure that a housing proposal like this furthers fair housing.
I still don't understand why they are allowed to be placed off-site in the first place. That does not seem to be inclusionary housing. You're segregating an entire sector of the population. And I'm sorry, but I just don't see how that really is fair. So appreciate your time. Thank you.
You're welcome.
Okay. John, I'm going to ask you to unmute.
Yes, hello. I sent about 3 questions and a comment to the chat. The first one is about the point of view of trying to develop a property. I think most of what's already been built under complete communities has been in high rent areas. I think there's one going up in Barrio Logan, which that in downtown has basically no height limit. So that's an opportunity for builders. In general, of course, developers going to go where it's the most, it's easiest to finance. Lenders are going to go where it's a higher rent area. So the market is going to tend to this concentration around the already kind of trendy areas like North Park or something. Now, my first question is, I would like to, I'm starting a nonprofit. My concept is to put housing for families with kids right close to the schools, especially elementary schools, like a 5-minute walk. In my comment, I give the Wikipedia definition of density for complete communities is a 5-minute walk, which is perfect for little kids to see their friends at school and at home, for parents to collaborate with babysitting. This is, of course, the opposite of suburban sprawl, which we've inherited in Southern California. So I'm suggesting that a good way to seed these complete communities all over the city would be to use the elementary schools, especially, or the schools, as nuclei for complete communities, because you're not going to always find the amenities that you want, but one amenity is there. It's the school. In our average density, a zone of 5-minute walks from the center only supports has enough population, about 600 people, to support maybe a fast food, not a whole array of amenities, everything that you want in a 5-minute walk. That's more something that's going to work downtown from right out of the box. So if you have to plan for the future, it can take decades to actually get there, but this would be a good place to start. So my first question is, if I want to find a developer to develop property close to a school for this purpose of families with kids in that school, it's quite difficult because they all have pretty sharp pencils. And I was just wondering if you could direct me to a nonprofit, or who could direct me to a nonprofit developer, a nonprofit lender that would be friendly toward this kind of project, because I've heard there's a lot of social impact funds out there. So that's the first question.
I think there's some organizations that we might be able to point you to who can assist with that. Not necessarily our wheelhouse at the planning department, but the San Diego Housing Commission does a lot of work with nonprofit developers.
Okay.
And so they could potentially assist
Yeah,
with that. It might
I've
be
spoken to Hannah Diaz there once. So just try them and ask them for pointers to lenders and developers.
Was that the Housing Federation that you reached out to?
Housing Commission I was speaking of, Housing
Okay.
Federation.
Housing Federation works a lot with affordable housing developers, and it's potentially they could have some resources for you. I'm only kind of guessing at that. Probably
yeah,
would be best to shoot me an email and we can see what we can find.
Okay, is your email here somewhere?
It's not on here, but it's salitchney@sandiego.gov.
Which is SA and Lichney at sandiego.gov, huh?
Yes.
Okay,
And-
perfect.
And Melissa, maybe you can put it in the chat for everybody. I think that'd be helpful.
All right. Then I guess if you see the chat there, I'm down the list there, and I have a couple other questions or sort of comments about the at the city. I was at the webinar for the city's council meeting, and although it passed, nobody liked the 1 mile distance from transit. So I was suggesting that with this incentives for homes near schools, we could make up the acreage that was lost by changing the walking distance from the crow flies distance for the half mile. And I was asking, how can you get that to a meeting agenda of the council? I think Melissa put a link to how the planning department does have a page where you can suggest a change to the code. Is that the response to that, or maybe is there another way to get something on the agenda? Because when you make a comment to the council, they just say, okay, and they just keep going. There's no dialogue like it is here today.
Melissa posted our land development code update, and we do accept ideas for amendments to the code from the public. So certainly you can submit your idea there. I can't guarantee you it would get to the city council, but we certainly give each suggested idea. We review them, and
The planning commission or the planning department has a meeting on these things.
Yes, we would have a process where we would put together the land development code updates that we recommend for the year.
And then my third comment was that with this 5,000 acres they added with the SDAs with the 1 mile walk, that's kind of overshooting because the densities are so great with the complete communities. You can put 200 units per acre. So we have a housing goal of 13,000 units a year. You can meet that with 50 or 60 acres. So I'm just wondering whether they're kind of pell-mell here. I mean, I see there may be, course correction. You do one way and then you go a little bit the other way. But I would think that if you really want to cut down on commuting, you're going to have kind of a Manhattan with suburbs the way it's going. And you're going to still have people, going up the 805, up to 94 to work and coming back. So if you really believe the complete communities concept and look at the Wikipedia article, what it's really about, you really want to start building communities with all of those, like there's a restaurant, there's a bank, everything in walking distance, and there's a job. And then you don't have to drive up to Poway or Carmel Valley for your job. And if you really want to do something about commuting, then it would be good to start these true complete communities and not just a single high rise here and there, because a high rise could hold maybe say 50 units. And so you have, 100 people there. That doesn't really add much to your, what they call catch basin for businesses. And that's why they're going where the amenities already are. And if you want to have amenities out in the suburbs, as it were, got to start building those little nuclei now. And so I thought that was a good argument for my idea of the home near school.
All right. Thank you, John. Appreciate your comments.
Okay.
All right. Dana, I'm going to ask you to unmute.
Okay. Seth, can you tell me what incentives are being proposed for the 3-bedroom units for complete communities?
It would be, I'm sorry, I'm completely blanking on what it was. Can I, it was a, I'll have to get back to you on that, Dan. I apologize.
Okay, do you recall what they were for the moderate income units?
Moderate was going to be the idea if that the moderate income units, if you were to do additional, right now, as you know, the requirement is for 40% of the base units to be deed restricted affordable for low, very low, and moderate. This would increase that amount for moderate and it would replace the requirement for low and very low. So instead of doing 40%, you could do something along the lines of 80% base units at moderate deed restriction as an incentive for moderate income housing, rather than doing 40% for low, very low, and moderate.
So instead of doing 120% combined, you do 80% and they would all be moderate?
No, 100% of the 80% of the base units could be deed restricted for moderate incomes.
Right, but you're saying it was 40% of the base units before for moderate.
No, 40% was the total for moderate, very low, and low. And this could be 80% for just for moderate.
Okay, got that. Okay. Okay, and what units then would remain for waived diffs in complete communities? It would be the deed restricted, anything else?
I don't believe there would be anything else that would be waived for the diff.
Okay, just the deed restricted.
Correct.
Okay, and can you tell me for the single room occupancy, what is the definition of near transit?
It would be in the tied to the existing affordable housing in all communities program, which says that it would be the sustainable development area.
Is that one of the pieces of code that was modified by SDAs?
Yes.
Yes?
Yes.
Okay. So it's now a mile.
1 mile or 3/4 mile walking distance.
Right. Right. And then fingers into high opportunity zones. Okay. I have one other question, and then I'd like to just agree with Rebecca's comment that it seems to me that off-siting the affordable housing for complete communities is the opposite of inclusionary housing. So I just want to make that statement. And I wanted to ask you, I didn't get the chance to or ask you on Tuesday, what is the status of the ADU economic study that the planning department promised to have completed by the end of 2022 for the city council?
It's being delayed until we would have a proposal for amending the ADU bonus program.
Wasn't that supposed to be the basis for amending the ADU bonus program?
Right, and we don't have major amendments to the ADU bonus program in this housing action package, so the study wasn't necessarily needed at this time.
Okay, so it's on indefinite hold, that economic study?
For right now, yes, I would say.
Thank you.
Okay, Alex, I'm going to ask you to unmute.
Okay, great. Thank you.
We lost Alex there.
Yes. Alex, are you there?
Okay, try it again.
There we
Does that
go.
work?
Yes,
Okay.
Yeah.
I have a couple of questions. The two of them are about the offsite issue. I'm not sure I fully understood your answer to Rebecca's question. Why are affordable units offsite, and how does that promote the city's equity goals?
The idea is to provide an option for affordable units. And what ends up happening is that those affordable units can be included in other affordable housing development programs. So in order to get affordable housing built, there usually is you have to pursue grants, you have to pursue financing. This is an opportunity development that is market rate development to contribute to that idea. The allowance for offsite affordable units for the inclusionary housing program has been around for quite some time, and density bonus units also are allowed to be built offsite. Again, one of the things that we are trying to promote with the development of those offsite units is an assurance that they're built either close to the existing the market rate development, or they're built in an area where affordable housing currently doesn't exist. So that would be a major goal for whatever allowances would be allowed for offsite complete communities units as well.
Okay, so the idea is not that they're, I'm not going to say substandard, but they're not the same quality as the other units. That's not the case.
No, they would still need to be brand new developed units existing to the code. There wouldn't be necessarily a change in how they're developed, but they would provide those opportunities in areas where they don't exist.
Okay, so is the idea that they be built on land that's cheaper? And if so, that seems to me like you are putting them into neighborhoods that are less affluent.
Well, they wouldn't be allowed necessarily in places that don't meet those requirements, those geographic requirements. And that's something that we want to make sure that we're also addressing for complete communities as well. So if it needs to be in a high resource community, for example, those are places where there are high paying jobs, where there are high performing schools. We could, Melissa, I think we could include a link to the latest opportunity area maps if folks want to see where those high resource communities are located. Those are the types of places where we would say, this is where your offsite affordable units would be allowed to be built. And they wouldn't be allowed to be built in places that are moderate or low resource communities.
Okay, well, that's interesting, because apparently where the market rate housing is being built, you would assume would be a fairly resource rich area. That's not the case.
It might be, but we want to make sure, and that's part of the reason why we want to make sure that the offsite affordable units are also built in a resource rich community.
Okay, well, that kind of leads to my second question, and I guess I don't understand the proposal to remove offsite construction from the same planning area. I guess what do you see as the benefit of this change?
So there are 3 geographic areas where those offsite units can occur. And I think what we're trying to avoid is a situation like what you've actually just described, where you could have market rate units that are located in a wealthier part of a community, and then your offsite affordable units, because they could be in the same community planning area, could be in the places that aren't those high resource communities or those wealthier areas. And so if we remove the ability for that to be done, we would require that the offsite units either be within a mile or be within those high resource areas. So it's kind of, it's limiting the ability to have those offsite units be located anywhere within a specific community plan, which I think will, at least the intent of it is to target it in certain areas where it would further fair housing.
Interesting. So because community planning areas can be more than a mile wide, I suppose, huh?
They can be. And if I saw Melissa posted the link to the map, you can even see there's community planning areas that have high resource census tracts in some areas and moderate or low resource tracts in other areas.
Right. Well, let's see. Yeah, the question I have this. So this is an attempt to actually keep it closer to the original development? Correct.
Yes.
Okay.
Or have it located in a place that's a high resource community near.
Gotcha. Yeah, no, I understand. My other question about that, let's see. Well, yeah, had to do in fact with the planning areas. Like, you know, I'm in the Eastern area planning group. So let's say we have a moderate or market rate housing development, and it's built here in El Cerrito, and they go a mile west into Talmadge, which is a different planning area. And that's where the offsite affordable housing is built. How does that work? I mean, wouldn't that planning area be a little bit unhappy with us or the developer going, you built, you know, your market rate units in one development area and you're building the affordable ones elsewhere? Is that a problem at all?
It's currently allowed under the code.
Okay.
I don't know that it happens all that often.
Okay.
but it's, the idea is that you at least have those offsite units that are in relative proximity to the market rate units.
But that's never been an issue in the past. We've had, planning groups go, hey, what happened here?
Not that I've heard of.
Okay, all right. And I guess, have you done any studies that show that in fact, the housing that's built off-site is of the same quality? Is that really checked out?
I mean, I'm not sure what you mean by the same quality.
Well, I mean, I guess building inspectors, I mean, do they align with, does the building inspector of that property understand what's been built, a mile away or in another resource area?
I can't say I can answer that question, but
Okay.
whatever's built for either the market rate or the affordable would need to be built up to the requirements of the code,
Okay.
and would be inspected by a building inspector before they're done.
Gotcha. My last question is, I thought today your presentation would involve talking about SB 10. Is that not the case?
That's not the case. We'll have an in-person meeting on SB 10 on March 2nd.
Okay, great. Thank you.
You're welcome.
Okay, Jeffrey, I'm going to ask you to unmute.
Great, thank you for your time today. I also have a couple of questions on complete communities and some other things, but first with complete communities, is the incentive for 3+ bedrooms just that you're removing the waiver for the smaller units, or is there something else associated, and is that what you need to follow up on?
That's what I need to follow up on.
Okay, so
I have some more details on it, and I'm happy to provide those.
okay, will there be an intermediate incentive? Because today, basically, we get studio and 1 bedrooms. Is there also sort of a sliding scale to get 2+ bedrooms versus, going straight to 3+?
Not at this point. That could be something that we could consider in the future. I think we do see more 2-bedroom units than we do 3 that are built, that are currently built. But you're right, we do see a lot more studio 1-bedroom apartments. So we just want to make sure that the 3-bedroom apartments are something that's included as part of the proposal.
Okay, and I know it's off topic for today, but we'd like to see that same fee waiver removed for ADUs to also encourage larger ADU units, because that would fill a need in the community as well. Switching to, in this offsite location of the affordable units for complete communities. And I think the first thing is, for those of us who were actually at the council meeting, I'm not sure we heard a strong mandate for allowing offsite housing affordable units for complete communities. There were actually some fairly strong opinions against it, for the very reason that the term complete communities and the concept complete communities is that, communities are truly complete. And part of the equity part of this is, it's not just, that the housing units are of similar quality and size. Often these developments have other amenities. Certainly they have the ground floor commercial, they have, they have gyms, they have, media rooms, they have pools and barbecues. And it's hard to see how you can create an equitable situation by letting these units be off-site. And the other thing is, these units are not like, these developments are not like other developments today where we allow the density bonus and the affordable units to be put off site, because unlike the normal density bonus that might be, a 50% density bonus, complete communities has density bonuses of 300-400% in some cases. And certainly given that huge density bonus on the net, I think we can find a way to get these units on site as allowing it to be off site. And so I would like to see this proposal to be not considered, and keep complete communities as it is and as it was proposed by the planning department in the last code update. I'll leave it there for this. The only other mention is somebody brought up the fire hazard part. So 40% of all the parcels that are in the SDA are actually in very high fire hazard severity zones. So fire hazard is not being considered in these proposals for those who are interested in that danger.
Thanks for your comments, Jeff.
Okay. I apologize if I pronounce your name incorrectly, but Cameo, I'm going to ask you to unmute.
You actually got it right. Thank you, Sean.
Problem.
Seth, thank you for your time and energy today. I did have a clarification question first and foremost. So for the Housing Action Package 2.0, is the focus on family or single home ownership or family and single renters, or just in general increase of supply of homes in the San Diego market?
I'd say it's the latter. We don't have anything proposed that would lead to necessarily lead to or incentivize home ownership. But I think that's something that we could consider in the future. I think that's an issue that's certainly being raised and that we're getting feedback through these workshops as being something that could be prioritized. But as it stands, we're really looking for the development of units that have 3 bedrooms, whether they're rentals or ownership or for sale units.
Okay, for sure. Then the rest of what I have to share is more for public comment, because I currently work at UC San Diego. I support our efforts for our off-campus housing office, as well as actively supporting students that are actively housing insecure. And so I just want to make a note that when we're using words such as affordable or fair housing for all, we're also centering the unique experience of both undergraduate student renters and graduate student renters. Typically, undergraduate student renters are part-time employees, and their only way of finances is through their financial aid packages. Similarly, for our graduate students, they are, focused on their academic rigor, and so also working at a part-time rate. So when we talk about affordable, and thank you to the moderator in the chat for sharing forward kind of the, I guess, typical numbers you all are using, but I just wanted to further emphasize the particular circumstances with college students, especially naming that before the pandemic, the San Diego housing market was predominantly college students, since we are operating with 9 different college systems. And ever since the pandemic, they continue to be pushed out as renters. So I just wanted to uplift that forward and hope when we talk about affordability, we're also putting college students at the forefront. Thank you.
Thanks, Cameo. I'll just mention that we did have an item that we talked about on Tuesday for an incentive for student housing. So we are looking at trying to address that issue and certainly recognize the need for student housing as an important one.
Okay, Cheryl, I'm going to ask you to unmute. Oh, I think she lowered her hand. Let me see. Nam, I'm going to ask you to unmute. And I apologize if I mispronounced your name.
Oh, no, it's fine. It's fine. Thank you very much for your time. As made mentioned by some others here, complete communities includes not just residential uses, but also commercial uses, restaurants, shops, et cetera, et cetera. Are there any incentives for developing mixed use developments in this housing action or housing package?
No, not in this housing action package.
Understood. And are there are there incentives for developments by nonprofits, institutions, or community efforts, such as community land trusts versus the traditional private developer?
There's nothing in this housing action package. We did have a program that was included in Housing Action Package 1.0 that allowed for land owned by nonprofits to basically have a streamlined development approval.
And it's not in Housing Package 2.0?
No, it's an existing program that's in the code.
Okay, gotcha. Thank you.
Thank you.
Okay, Cheryl, I'm going to try again. Hopefully this time it works. Ask you to unmute.
Did it work?
I can hear you.
Oh, good. I'm extremely concerned, number one, about building in high fire risk areas. The maps of the central area of Greater Golden Hill show a good portion of it as high fire risk. And there have been numerous articles about skyrocketing costs for obtaining fire insurance. And that needs to be factored in. A lot of insurers don't want to even cover it. I know there's various state requirements about that, but it makes no sense to build in areas that are going to lead to calamities for the people who rent this. And this is a big reason why I'm also opposed to off-site areas. Just letting a building inspector come in and take a look at whether it meets building code standards is not the same as ensuring equal amenities. There should be a required list of all the amenities, a checklist for the inspector to go in and see that every single amenity provided in the original market level development is also included in the off-site one, or as many speakers have pointed out, you'll be building substandard isolated areas for people with low income and potentially in high fire risk areas, and they can't get the insurance. And if they're renting the versus buying, that whole issue of insurance is another huge factor. So I do believe that these need to be carefully looked at and not just say, oh yeah, there's no environmental impact here, we don't need one, if it's going to be in a high fire risk area. Thank you.
Thank you, Cheryl.
Okay, and apologizing again in advance if I mispronounce your name, Lauro Dalico. I'm going to ask you to unmute.
Go ahead and start. Can you hear me?
Yes.
Okay.
Believe they've muted again. Let me ask to unmute.
Okay, there you go. This is in relation to affordable housing. Basically, developers have an out. If they're required to put in affordable housing, and they can pay basically a $20 per square foot in lieu fee, not to put in construction that costs about $200 a square foot to build. Municipalities that do this, that have very low in lieu fees, are essentially saying, if you're not wealthy, you're not welcome. What will you do to bring attention to this legislation, which is embedded in our government and is very powerful and is preventing a lot of affordable housing from going in? Thank you.
I think as it relates to our inclusionary housing ordinance, we don't have a proposal to change the in lieu fee. I do know there's a structure that's in place that was approved a few years ago on how that fee is calculated. So that is still currently something that's on the code. As it relates to complete communities, we don't have, or at least we haven't put together any type of in lieu fee option that could be done. I think, you know, we appreciate your comment on the need for affordable housing to be on site.
Well, Georgia Gomez tried to correct the in lieu fee situation a few years ago, and it demonstrated just how toxic a political cudgel this is. So I would really appreciate whenever you can to bring attention to the in lieu fee issue, because it really is affecting affordable housing within our city. Thank you.
Appreciate your comment. Thank you.
Okay, so I'm seeing that most of the individuals with their hand raised have already asked a question, and I want to make sure we get over to the Q&A for any questions that can be answered in there. But before I do, just want to remind everybody, if there's a question that comes to mind after today's webinar, or if you feel more comfortable asking questions via email, please contact us at homesforallofus@sandiego.gov. That address is right here on the screen. I'm going to jump over to the Q&A. Okay, I have a question here, Seth, from Gabriel. What are the neighborhood amenities that will be required in the quote allow of offsite affordable housing development section?
So the current complete communities regulations includes a list of the neighborhood amenities that can be constructed as part of the development. On the slide that I presented, I had a list of some examples of those. It could be a public promenade, a plaza, some kind of space that's available for pocket parks, some type of neighborhood amenity that's included as part of the development. So when we talk about what neighborhood amenities would be required for offsite units, it would be similar neighborhood amenities that are already existing in the code.
Okay. I'm gonna jump back over to the verbal questions. And I see Cheryl, you have a question again. I'm going to ask you to unmute.
I don't think Cheryl has her hand up. Doesn't look like it.
I put my hand down, I hope.
There we go. Yes, I see it's down now. Thanks, Cheryl.
Thanks.
And Jason, I'm going to ask you to unmute.
Yeah, one more question on the complete communities, that the elimination, I guess, going back to the inclusionary housing is separate from complete communities, and that code being updated with the, was it same planning community area being taken out? Would that also carry over to looking at the offsite affordable requirement, and would it be following the same code or the same update to that, where it's either, as I understand it, is it one or the other? It's within 1 mile or a sustainable development area, or does it have to be a mile and a sustainable development area?
I would think that since we're proposing to remove the community planning area as an option for inclusionary and density bonus, that we would not include it for complete communities. And the second part of your question, it's an option. So it's either within 1 mile of the market rate project, or it's in an SDA, a high resource area, and a community that currently does not have affordable housing.
Okay, and so that could be as simple as taking 2 neighborhoods, for instance. Let's say it was Bankers Hill and like Midtown. As long as it's meeting an SDA requirement, that would be something to be considered as part of an offsite affordable option.
If it was in an SDA, and I'd have to look and see if Bankers Hill is a high resource community as well.
Okay, I was looking at the map shared, and it looked like it was. That's why I was just looking at those two. For instance, Bankers Hill and Midtown are both highest and high resource. So I guess if we're not exactly within a mile, but we're meeting that criteria, that could be something to consider as part of the code amendments moving forward.
Correct.
Okay, thank you so much.
You're welcome.
Okay. And Dana, I see you still have your hand up, so I'm going to ask you to unmute.
Thank you. I just want to point out an example of how this separate offsiting doesn't really work when it's executed. There's a project in the college area called Zuma Apartments. It's at 6237 Montezuma. And I'm not quite sure which program they used, but they offsited 2 units to 6852 and 6854 Richard Street, because they didn't want to put the 50% AMI apartments on site. It's a student apartment complex. And so they put them 1.4 driving miles away, further from campus. And they took an old house and they put an ADU behind it. And I do suspect that the house and the ADU do not include a fitness center, a community coffee and tea bar, possibly utilities included, premium cable included, maybe central air, flat screen TVs in each of the rooms, Energy Star appliances, washers and dryers, and I might point out that the ADUs and the ADU and the house are in moderate resource neighborhoods. So somehow, whatever the good intentions are for this separate but equal program, these units, the 50% AMI units, did not end up with the same amenities as the Zoom apartments, and they did not end up in a high or highest resource community. So whatever the intentions are, Seth, the execution isn't happening. And these offsite units are not serving the people they are meant to serve. They are not only separate, but they are not equal. And in this case, not a mile away. Maybe it's a mile as the crow flies, but if you'd walk it or drive it, it's 1.4 miles. So when you're redoing your code, you might want to set in place a process that ensures that these people are treated equally, or accept the fact that they're not being treated equally and get rid of this offsiting and create what are truly complete communities, and just get rid of this because it is discriminatory. Thank you.
Thank you, Dan. I appreciate that example.
Okay, Rebecca, I'm going to ask you to unmute.
Thank you. Thank you. I'm going to go back to something I found a while back in some research, and it involves HUD's 2021 interim final rule called the IFR. It requires that HUD grantees regularly certify compliance to a standard that requires them to take meaningful action to combat residential segregation and eliminate unequal access to housing related opportunities. One of these actions involved, and I quote, transforming racially or ethnically concentrated areas of poverty into areas of opportunity. Now, I interpret that to mean that you should bring the opportunity to a previously underserved area that has been traditionally segregated or lower income, not a high opportunity area at all. Yet what you're proposing here with the city is you're encouraging this development in what the California Tax Credit Allocation Committee has designated as high and highest opportunity areas. So I'm really unclear, and I hope you can provide me with a clarification, because I asked this in the chat and it was not addressed. How does what you're doing further this goal of transforming racially or ethnically concentrated areas of poverty into areas of opportunity? Because there are people who live in these areas of opportunity right now. They can't afford to move to a high or highest opportunity area no matter how low the rent is. They don't have the resources to do that. And I seriously doubt that you're going to be subsidizing their move. There are people who belong to multi-generational families in these neighborhoods who have strong community ties to these neighborhoods. And just saying we're going to encourage this development in something that the CTCAC has designated, I don't know how that conforms or fulfills the intent and the scope of what HUD has done with the IFR. So if you could, please explain this to me. Thank you.
Sure. I think the intent here is to address a different part of fair housing, and that is to provide opportunities for housing for all people in all communities. And that is the intent of allowing for the offsite affordable units to be in places where they currently don't exist. I would encourage you to take a look, and we can include a link in the chat at our housing element, because we address fair housing in a number of different ways. And even the sections that the ways that we promote opportunities in these areas is done through other programs that the city operates, other initiatives that are being undertaken, like Build Better San Diego. And I think you'll be able to see in there a number of ways that we address fair housing kind of from the with a full spectrum of actions. This one in particular, the idea is to allow for affordable housing in places where it currently doesn't exist. That is directly related to overcoming patterns of discrimination and segregation that have occurred where affordable housing wasn't allowed in certain communities. This would make it so that if those units were going to be built offsite, that they would be in an area where there currently is not affordable housing, which is a part of what you're talking about. It's not the entire, doesn't capture the entire requirement, but there are other ways that we can address the issue that you've raised. And I would encourage you to take a look at the housing element and how we propose to address those issues.
Yes, I am reading the housing element right now. And one thing that this does bring to mind to me with encouraging development in high and highest opportunity areas, it's akin to busing. You're busing the poor kids to a richer school, and it leaves behind the people who cannot make it onto that bus. And that is the thing that I find rather disturbing and short-sighted. So thank you for your time, Seth.
You're welcome.
Okay, Jeffrey, I'm going to ask you to unmute.
Yeah, I'd like to pivot to the underutilized commercial sites proposal. There's already a lot of places in the city that are zoned for mixed-use development, and we also have introduced things like RMX and EMX zones. So it's unclear, what these incentives are to build in commercial zones. It's different than what we're already doing with our zoning and our community plans. So if you could elaborate on that, that'd be great.
Sure. I think part of it is, we don't have updated community plans and zoning for every community, but we do have places where there are commercial properties on commercial zones that also allow for housing. And so the intent here is to basically provide an incentive so that those areas don't sit for years as vacant commercial sites. If they're particularly underutilized, that there is an opportunity for redeveloping that site into housing and meeting what the current zoning would allow.
So is this a change in effect to the general plan? I mean, are you rezoning, or are you just sort of providing a virtual rezoning?
It's not rezoning. It would the proposal would need to be consistent with the current zone. And if that's on a commercial zone that allows for housing, and it's on a commercial site that does not have housing, it would be an incentive to develop housing or a mixed use development on that site.
Okay, and what form then is the incentive? Is it the usual sort of diff thing? Parking waivers, amenity waivers? What kind of incentives are there?
It would either be a waiver of a zoning requirement or perhaps a density bonus.
Well, it wouldn't already have a density bonus?
It could, this would be an additional density bonus that could be added.
And presumably if it was in an SDA, it could get complete communities as well, correct?
If it's zoned for 20 dwelling units per acre or more, it could.
Yeah. Okay, and then just one more thing, you mentioned that for the SDA, you're using the 2035 Regional Transportation Plan. The ordinance allows for the selection of either a transportation improvement program or a transportation plan, but it doesn't actually stipulate which one to use. So how did you land on 2035?
2035 has been used for the development of the transit priority area when it was adopted as with the climate action plan. And so part of the reason why the climate action plan includes goals for reducing greenhouse gases by 2035. Therefore, the TPA and subsequently the SDA use the transit for 2035 so that it aligns with the climate action plan.
So does the climate action plan then legislatively stipulate that you use the 2035 RTP? Because obviously it's not in the ordinance. It seems like an inference, not a definitive decision.
I don't think the climate action plan stipulates it, but the state law that allows for the use of a regional transportation plan.
Right, but then who, I guess the question is who made that decision?
It was made when the climate action plan was developed. So when it was adopted, that was the 2035 TPA map that was adopted with the climate action plan.
So the council decided to do that.
I mean, yeah, when they adopted it.
Okay, thank you.
You're welcome.
Okay, and John, I'm going to ask you to unmute.
Okay, it's a comment about the requirements for being in the complete community zone. Basically, it pretty much has to be already a multifamily zone. I mean, maybe RS11 might get 20 units per acre, but it's not. It's going to leave out the single family zones. So there was a comment about discrimination. I'm looking at the segregation. Looking at that map that you just put up about the resources. Now, City Heights is one of the main areas that's marked there in the lowest resources as high segregation and poverty. It is in the complete community zone along a good part of it, especially along El Cajon and University Boulevards, because you do have all those businesses there. I am not sure whether the middle part in between was excluded because of lack of amenities or lack of being single family. I'm just trying to look at grid 20 here right now to see that. I think, yeah, maybe it's I don't know, it might be multifamily, but so the question is, do you want high density? These also, City Heights already is a neighborhood. City Heights and I think Logan, Barrio Logan are the parts of town that have the highest density already. So I guess there's a good enough reason to build more there than you already have the density. What you really want in those areas are jobs. And I don't know how you bring jobs in there, but a lot of people, just need housing. Yeah, I'm looking at City Heights. I think it's all zoned multifamily. So technically you could maybe extend the zone there, not just along El Cajon and University. You could include more of City Heights as a high density, as a complete community zone. If that's what you're trying to do, is bring high rises to the disadvantaged areas. And of course, if you bring more housing, that is going to be more customers for those businesses. And University Avenue in particular is kind of struggling. The businesses there, most of them are not doing that well. And if you bring in more housing, there's kind of a synergy between the housing element and the commercial element. So maybe you want to look ahead a little bit and not only say, well, I have to have these resources there. You also say, is it kind of like where those amenities will increase if we put more housing? I don't know. That was my comment.
Appreciate your comment, John. Thank you.
Okay, I'm not seeing any more raised hands in the participants list. So if anybody has any additional questions, please raise your hand at this time. Okay. Jeff, I see your hand is raised. I'm going to ask you to unmute.
Sorry, this will be a quick one. On your review slide, you didn't show going to the Community Planners Committee. Does that mean that these are the only sort of public input that you're going to be collecting, or is that just an oversight on that slide?
No, we will be going to the Community Planners Committee.
Okay, great.
Okay, and Mary, I'm going to ask you to unmute.
Oh, okay, and this will be a quick one. And how are you going to track if you actually are building in high resource areas? How is that going to be tracked, so that we know that it's happening?
So are you asking kind of from a perspective of how do we know that where the offsite units would be proposed is in a high resource community?
Right, and I'm just going to say that since I'm in an unresourced area by choice, I just want to ensure that 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 housing is in all areas, because really that does in a way become inclusive, because they will become a part of the community. So how are you going to track to ensure that that you don't get pushed back from certain areas that may typically not have affordable housing, and that it doesn't end up in like under-resourced areas? I know that you say it won't happen, but we do know that it has happened. So how are you going to track that those houses, and who's going to track that where houses, affordable housing is actually being built?
So that would be part of the development approval process, where the developer would need to state where they were putting the affordable housing. The Development Services Department would need to confirm that that area is a high or highest resource community. And if it wasn't, then that development wouldn't be permitted. There would be a requirement for them to either provide the housing on site or off site. So they would have to show one way or another that they're doing that.
Okay. All right. Thank you.
You're welcome.
Okay, John, I'm going to ask you to unmute.
Okay, of course, what's affordable for the builder or the owner is not what's affordable for the tenant. So you cannot make people build houses, but maybe there's ways to help them. I think obviously one way to have affordable housing is you do it in more affordable neighborhoods, although on a high rise of the land cost is maybe not such a big percentage of the total cost. But yeah, so
and just to be clear, John, we're talking about deed restricted affordable units. So these would be signing a covenant to ensure that they would be made affordable to the required income level.
Right. Although, of course, the percentage is based on the base density. So your overall percentage of affordable units in a complete communities complex is not high. There's a question: if I put up a high rise in the middle of City Heights, do people who can afford more want to live there? I mean, that's also a question. So I that's why I thought that key question was who will develop properties or high rises or mid rises in the more affordable areas. Who wants to do that? The regular commercial lenders and developers don't. They want to do it, in the trendy areas. And I mean, we don't want to do Pruitt-Igoe either. Have high rises that become slums. So, yeah.
That's a very difficult question for me to answer, John. I think all we're trying to do from a standpoint is ensure that there's opportunities for those developments to get built.
Yeah.
It gets into a much bigger picture on housing financing and how it actually gets constructed.
Right. Okay. Thank you. I don't have the answers either. Just the questions. Okay, thank you.
Okay, so there are no more additional questions or raised hands in the participants or attendees list. If you have a question, please raise your hand. I am seeing that there is a question in the Q&A, so I'll jump over there. This is from Rebecca. Who enforces these affordable housing covenants? I've asked the Housing Commission about some of their agreements regarding affordable housing that are on file with the county, and they profess to know nothing about them.
I don't know that that really relates to the housing action package today. So,
okay,
we can, if you want to send us an email, we can take a look into it.
All right, and I'll jump back over to the participants list just to confirm. I'm seeing no raised hands.
Okay, we can go to the next slide. Just a quick reminder before we go, and thanks everyone for your participation today. We do have 2 more workshops on the housing action package proposals listed here on the slides. Certainly go to our website. If we can go back to the slide that has the website address, Victoria, that would be great, because I want to make sure everybody has the ability to go to that website and participate in these workshops. There it is. Okay, thanks everybody. Have a great day.